But there's really something that's really amazing that stuck out to me. Um, and so again, we don't ask what do you think, right? When we're teaching a small group Bible study, we don't ask what do you think because people are going to think weird things, right? But you do say you do ask the question, what does it say? And what it says in verse 3 down through verse 8 is really kind of amazing to me. It says, verse 3, brothers, choose 7 men from among you. Okay, so the problem was there were some people being overlooked in the food distribution, and that we didn't want that to happen. So in verse 3 it says, brothers, choose men from among you who you know to be full of the Spirit and wisdom. All right, so there's your first criteria. There's your first character quality that you're looking for, right? Someone who is full of the Spirit and wisdom. We will turn this responsibility over to them, and they're going to give attention. Verse 5, the proposal pleased the whole group, and they chose Stephen, a man full of faith and the Holy Spirit. So this is not long after Pentecost, right? And the coming of the Holy Spirit and the founding of the church. And so here is Stephen, a man who is already characterized, right, by a man of faith and a man full of the Holy Spirit. And then you go over to verse 8, and it says, and Stephen, a man full of God's grace and power. So consider that these qualities, full of the Spirit, full of wisdom, verse 5, full of faith, the Holy Spirit, grace and power, that was the things that they chose to in a man to head up a food distribution. Food distribution. We look at that these days and we say food distribution, you can find anybody to do that. Food distribution, what big deal? But the Bible right here says they chose a man to head up food distribution who was full of the Spirit, full of wisdom, full of faith. The Holy Spirit, again in verse 5, in verse 8, full of God's grace and power. That's the kind of man we want heading up our food ministry, the food pantry. Yeah. That's amazing. Nowadays we say, well, we use the word wheelhouse, right? Man, that's your wheelhouse. We use wheelhouse to describe the man that does a thing, whatever that. Well, that's his wheelhouse. Let's get him to do it. And I understand having a skill, but come on, compared to what the first century church, the criteria that they used compared to the criteria that we use today is nearly shameful. Because they said a man full of wisdom, full of the Spirit, a man full of faith, and of the Holy Spirit in verse 5, and a man full of the grace of God and power. Nowadays, we look at a guy and we say, well, that's his wheelhouse. We'll get him to do it. Maybe that might be what's wrong with the church today. So